Throughout the 1980s, 90s, and early 2000s, there was a trend of increasing pedestrian safety on roadways in the United States. That trend, however, stopped around 2009. Since then, there's been a consistent annual increase in the number of pedestrian fatalities. In 2001, for example, there were 3,000 more pedestrian deaths than in 2009. A staggering 85% of these deaths occurred in the nighttime. You might have some ideas why these deaths are happening, but here's the mystery. The US is mostly alone in this trend. The rest of the industrialized world is still, generally, seeing a decline in pedestrian deaths. So there's three big questions. What changed in 2009? Why is the US unique compared to other industrialized countries? And why are so many deaths happening at night? Let's start with that change that happened in 2009. You might be thinking what I originally thought. Well, that's when smartphones really started to take over. And you'd be right, at least partially. Apple introduced the iPhone in 2007, and by 2009, 60 million Americans had smartphones. And handheld screen like a smartphone has so many distractions. But think about the other screens that also started developing. Cars began having touchscreens built into their consoles. In the past, vehicles typically featured a limited number of dials that could be operated by touch. Each dial had a specific function, such as controlling the temperature or the radio. Drivers became familiar with the location and purpose of these dials, allowing them to manipulate them without constantly looking at them. Now you have to go through a bunch of unique touchscreen options just to change, say, the temperature. So you have a smartphone and a smartphone-like device to distract you while you're driving. But here's the interesting thing. This trend of increased pedestrian deaths is mostly unique to the US. Why isn't this happening in other countries that obviously also have smartphones and touchscreens in cars? Partly, Americans are using their phones differently while driving because of the types of cars they drive. For example, the US overwhelmingly has automatic cars. In fact, only 1% of cars sold in the US in 2023 were stick. So when driving a car with automatic transmission, it is much easier to multitask and use your smartphone. In contrast, Europe has a far larger share of manual transmissions, over 70%, which require two hands to drive. Most of the time, you literally cannot use your smartphone. There's another thing about American cars too. They're literally bigger than European cars. They're more elevated and have higher hoods. So when a car hits a pedestrian, the pedestrian gets struck in the upper torso and head rather than the lower torso and legs like with a smaller car. They're also heavier and take fractions of a second longer to fully stop after braking, but these fractions of a second can be critical. With bigger cars, there's a much higher chance of fatal injury. But again, people were driving big cars long before smartphones. So we've looked at several parts of the equation. There's increased accessibility to smartphone and smartphone-like technology, and Americans drive cars that enable the multitasking ability to use your smartphone while driving. These cars are also bigger, but they've always been bigger than European cars. And why are more deaths, a lot more deaths, happening at night? It can't be as simple as, well, it's dark so it's harder to see, because then the share of night deaths should be the same over time, including before smartphones. There's research that backs up that people check and touch their smartphones more while driving at night. There hasn't been a direct explanation as to why, but there are some theories. For example, a lot of people get off work and have a chance to get caught up on messages. They may coordinate with their partner about errands that need to be run, or just simply check and respond to messages they missed during the workday. Or they're even potentially still keeping tabs on work things while leaving the office. So is that it? The drivers are all to blame? Considering I'm posing that question, you can probably tell my answer is no. There are factors outside the driver's control that are also leading to more pedestrian deaths. In other words, there are more pedestrians in situations where they might be exposed to a deadly crash. One theory is about demographics. In recent years, there's been a significant shift in population towards the Sunbelt regions of the United States, particularly metropolitan areas in Texas and Florida. These warmer regions have historically exhibited poor pedestrian safety records because they developed in the auto age, unlike more walkable cities like New York City and Philadelphia. The infrastructure is designed with the assumption that individuals primarily rely on cars for transportation, resulting in limited crosswalks and stoplights. Case in point, Florida has seen a 70% increase in pedestrian deaths since 2009. There's another quirk in the increase in pedestrian deaths. For example, in Los Angeles, about 30% of the fatalities are homeless people. Looking into it though, you can start to understand why. These are people who live near high-speed roads and are also present there at night. This wasn't necessarily as significant back in 2009, but in recent years, there have been increased homelessness populations that have coincided with increased pedestrian deaths. Put together, there isn't one simple answer to why pedestrian deaths deaths are increasing. There have been multiple factors that have increased since 2009 that are magnifying each other: the rise of smartphones, improved car dashboard technology, and demographic shifts. With car-centric infrastructure in the United States, there isn't much that can be done without addressing just that, the infrastructure itself. That also means there isn't a silver bullet answer. Other countries have achieved safer pedestrian outcomes. They prioritize safety over speed by investing in safe road designs and implementing laws and regulations that prioritize pedestrian safety. This commitment ensures that their roads are designed to minimize the risk of not just for pedestrians, but for drivers too. In other words, there's a lot that can still be done. At some point, someone will have to start.